Ladies and gentlemen, we are transitioning swiftly from Ethel on the back of that incredible tri-talk on power, ethics and accountability in business to the sixth and final topic this morning still. And this is where we begin to ask the question, what needs to be true for partnerships to turn digital access into meaningful inclusion? And this is in partnership with the Vodacom Foundation. Now, as per the pattern we've been holding for the last 2 days, we're going to start off with a sponsor introduction, and then we're going to transition into a panel discussion, which will be preceded by a poll. Offering us the sponsor introduction is Andisa Ntsubane. Andisa is the Managing Executive looking after brand, marketing and communications at Vodacom. He is a chartered marketer and comes into this conversation with over 2 decades of experience working across multiple industries, including FMCG, telecommunications and banking. He's also an independent non-executive director of Cricket South Africa. So set the scene. Please help me welcome with a warm round of applause, Andisa Ntsubane.
Dumelang, Absheni, Molweni, Sanbonani, Nda, Khiyamora. It is an absolute privilege and pleasure to be with all of you this morning. I always say that the most successful companies in the world solve problems, and they're able to derive commercial value from those activities. And if you think about it, the continent of Africa has the most problems. And therefore, we represent the single largest opportunity to solve real problems and derive commercial value from it. And so there's no place that certainly I'd rather be than here on this continent and in this country, helping to solve real life problems. And I'm truly, truly grateful that sitting here in this room are all the people who wake up with a deep sense of purpose in helping to solve the biggest issues that this country faces. And so for us at Vodacom, it is a deep pleasure to be here today to share a little bit about what we're doing on our side, but also to acknowledge all of the work that each and every single one of you are doing to help drive the agenda forward. And so to Nick and the Trialogue team, and for everybody here, from the bottom of our data bundles, we thank you for this opportunity. I really slept last night in deep thought about what I heard yesterday. A really powerful day, a really insightful day, and thanks to the likes of Mrs. Gugushe from First Rand yesterday. But the person that left the most impression on me yesterday was Hein. And Hein, I want to, again, from the bottom of my data bundles, thank you for your inspirational speech. We truly have no excuse. And so I wondered, as I often do, because you have to personalize these things. If you talk about these things without personalizing them, we aren't able to truly tangibilize them. And so when we talk about digital access and access as a general statement, I often think about how many of us wake up in the morning and before we climb out of bed, we check our phones. I won't embarrass you. However, the converse is also true. How many children and learners and children around South Africa don't have the opportunity to wake up every morning, be able to reach to a device, to search for a job, to search for government services, and to just connect and have opportunities? And we really have to think about this in that context to say, whilst we are privileged, how do we help to close that digital divide? And so from a Vodacom perspective, our history is intimately intertwined with the history of South Africa. We were born the same advent of democracy in this country, and for over 30 years, we've spent decades with one single-minded purpose: to connect South Africans to a better future. And we've spent a lot of money investing in infrastructure, investing in networks, fiber, towers, and we've said we will connect you and connect South Africans from the ground, from the towers, and even from the sky to make sure that we leave nobody behind. And we've invested a significant amount of money to try and do that. Because even though we've made some significant inroads, and Vodacom has been honored and blessed to be recognized as the company that's had the most developmental impact by Trialogue for the past 9 years, we truly recognize that our job has just begun. Because a child sitting in school with Wi-Fi but with no device is not digitally included. A teacher with connected classroom but no training is not digitally empowered. A young person with a matric certificate but no digital skill is not ready for the economy that is already here. Connectivity is the doorway, but what truly matters is what is on the other side. And at Vodacom, our work is anchored in 2 strategic pillars: education and gender empowerment. And we start with education and skills because that's the bridge between connectivity and long-term social and economic participation. But we also understand that to make a meaningful impact, we cannot do it alone. And we have seen the benefit of what cross-sector collaboration can make in terms of its difference. When government, private sector, civil society, and education partner, we see that we move faster, go deeper, and keep the solutions grounded in what the communities really need. So for us, the solution every single time is partners. And in 2018, we began to formalize what we now call our education system, not a CSI line item, not a once-off handout, a system. We started with 13 schools of excellence, and today we support 39 schools of excellence and 39 early childhood development centers across South Africa. But here's what makes the difference. In every school, we don't just install a cable. We upgrade infrastructure, we install proper computer labs, we provide devices, connectivity, as well as integrated whiteboards. We restore dignity, replacing pit latrines with real ablution facilities, because you cannot ask a child to learn if their most basic dignity is not respected. We place ICT coordinators, trained people on the ground, who keep the lab alive, who guide educators, who make sure connectivity translates into actual learning. We place psychosocial workers because we understand the space of gender-based violence, and we know that trauma does not remain outside the classroom. In 2024, we expanded this model to include special needs schools because inclusion is not a word you get to use selectively. And then there are the young people that are often not spoken about, the ones who passed matric, the ones who wanted to go further but couldn't afford to, the ones who needed a bridge. And through our Youth Academy, we've built, in partnership with Microsoft, Cisco, and the MIC CETA, we have trained more than 1,800 young South Africans in digital skills. And here's the part I love the most. These are the same young people we now place as ICT coordinators in our schools. The beneficiaries become the enablers. The pipeline feeds itself. This is what true partnership looks like. And so today, I'm not here asking that you take a bow for Vodacom. Today is really about acknowledging the true value and importance of partnerships and the work that all of you do in this room, because each and every single one of you was able to see the opportunity. And everybody knows the famous story. In the 1930s, there were 2 Dutch shoemaking companies who sent their sales reps to look for opportunities in Uganda. And after 1 month, the first sales rep phoned head office and said, "I'm coming home. Nobody wears shoes." The other sales rep phoned head office and said, "Bring everybody. We're going to open up a factory here." Nobody wears shoes. Same environment, 2 people, where one saw the opportunity, the other didn't. And my proposition to you is that by virtue of all of you sitting here, you've seen the opportunity to collaborate, to partner, and to help solve some of the biggest issues that South Africa is facing. And for that, we thank you from the bottom of our data bundles. I now invite the team.
Thank you so much, Andisa. You can't include selectively. And how do we look at devices and see dignity instead, or the opportunity to restore dignity? Thank you for setting the scene as we transition into our last panel before lunch today. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Takalani Netshitenzhe. She's a director for external and regulatory affairs at Vodacom South Africa. She's also the chairperson of the Vodacom Foundation. She is a public policy development expert with 20 years of experience in law writing, in national security, and also drives environment, social, and governance functions. Let's give her a round of applause. Taki, thank you so much for being here. Joining Taki is Mr. Louis Taylor. He's a director in the Department of Basic Education, and he looks after partnerships. He is the director for partnerships, and he brings into this conversation over 15 years of experience building collaborations that strengthen South Africa's education system. He developed and implemented the DBE's partnership framework and its guidelines. Let's give Mr. Louis a big round of applause as well. Thank you very much, sir. Joining Louis and Taki is Staff Sithole. Staff is the CEO of TechnoGirl Trust. Madame Sithole is the founder and CEO of TechnoGirl Trust. She's an accomplished businesswoman with over 30 years of experience in both public and private sectors. In 1995, she became one of the first directors in the Gauteng Department of Education, playing a pivotal role in establishing the department. Madam, thank you so much for being here. Let's give her a big round of applause. Thank you. And then finally, we also have Sympathone Shimange. Sympathone is a youth academy instructor at Lemoshanang Centre. She is an IT and project management professional based in Centurion with over a decade of experience in ICT training, technical support, and project coordination. She has built a career dedicated to empowering communities through technologies. Thank you so much for being here. Let's give her a round of applause. And you know that you've been put in your place when an elder comes onto stage and takes your seat. Mom, stuff, I'll move here.
Oh,
sorry. All is well. Nothing is broken. Nothing is broken. Nothing hurts. Thank you so much for making the time. And we're going to keep the standard practice. We're going to lead with our poll. I'm going to extend that reminder to all of us again to say, here's an opportunity to have a voice in this conversation. I will do some opening questions, but for the most part, I really want to bring your voice and help you shape the conversation that we're about to have here. So the poll is up on your devices. And the question is, where is the greatest gap between digital access and real inclusion? Where's the biggest gap between digital access and real inclusion? We should be seeing the options coming up on our devices now. Does the gap lie between teacher training and classroom support? Is it affordable devices and connectivity? Is it relevant digital learning content? Is it ongoing technical and user support? So we have the devices, but we don't have the ongoing technical and user support. Is it more closely in the community with parent and community digital literacy? And are the gaps there? Or is it data to track real learning and inclusion outcomes? Again, the trend or the thread rather of data keeps coming back into the conversation. I'm going to let that run in the background, and then to my panelists, we'll come back and just have a look at that together and see where our audience has landed. And of course, to encourage as many of us as possible to participate, including those who are in the online space. Sister Taki, let me start off with you, and then perhaps building on from some of the comments that Andisa made, but to give you an opportunity to set the scene for this conversation. What's working? What isn't? And what do you think it needs to change in order for us to really realize digital inclusion in South Africa?
Thank you so much for having us. And let me thank Nick again for the partnership. I am going to start where my colleague left off, which is partnerships. For those of you that attend state-sponsored conferences like the South Africa Investment Conference, G20, you name it, partnerships are the must-have. And this is because of the realization that without partnerships, we are not going to be able to solve societal challenges. And Vodacom Group and all its subsidiaries in all the markets in which we operate, we subscribe to partnerships. In fact, we deliver what we deliver through partnerships. And so does the Vodacom Foundation, which is actually a department within Vodacom South Africa sitting in external affairs, where we interface with the regulators, where we deal with ESG, and the foundation finds expression within the S in ESG. We also deal with reputation management in external affairs, and therefore the reputation of Vodacom is very critical to us. We are always mindful in everything that we do not upset the ecosystem, and that is important to us. Our partners include NGOs. We've got small NGOs and big NGOs that we partner with. And we also work with government very closely. We always say in everything that we do in order to support government programs. We work with the Department of Basic Education. We work with Social Development. We work with the National Prosecuting Authority in the Department of Justice. And everything that we do is actually underpinned by the Sustainable Development Goals. So the pillars of our programs are actually derived from there. And from a South African perspective, we cannot not talk about the National Development Plan, Vision 2030. We are very much immersed in digital education. That is the flagship of what we do. And we don't talk about verticals in education. We talk about an ecosystem. And that ecosystem is informed by the white paper on education, which promotes the comprehensive approach to education, where the focus is not just on the learner. And we also have a gender-based violence program, which is also informed by the National Strategic Plan, where we have now incorporated our gender-based violence program and support in the schools. Now, because the Vodacom Foundation operates within Vodacom South Africa, the beauty of that is that we don't have to conduct feasibility studies to understand what are the problems of government, because government has already conducted a lot of those studies. Sure. We go to government and say, with our resources, what can we do to assist you? And in doing that, we have to avoid running ahead of ourselves, because there's always a tendency of big corporates to run ahead of ourselves because we've got the resources. For instance, when we connect schools, we work with quintile 1, 2, 3 schools, because those are the poorest schools. And we don't choose the schools that we connect. We go to the department so that they choose the schools for us. But there have been instances where we have run ahead of ourselves, and the department, as a credible partner, they've actually pulled us back and say, please don't run ahead of yourselves, let's work together. For instance, during COVID, we were expected to connect virtual classrooms, which are broadcasting schools. It's a broadcasting solution. And once the solution was created by ICASA in the Department of Communications and approved by the Department of Basic Education, we decided to take the shortcut and went to a quintile 4-5 school to run the proof of concept. And quintile 4-5 schools, like private schools, they operate differently from quintile 1, 2, 3. There is a lot of governance because the parents are paying, and therefore anything that you do there, the school governing body has to consult with the parents. So we hit a wall, and we ran back to the department and say, can you please unblock? The department said, hello, remember, our partnership is for you to operate in quintile 1, 2, 3 schools. That is why we have come up with this idea of a virtual classroom, because during COVID, children in quintile 1, 2, 3 schools were actually sitting at home when their counterparts in 4 and 5 and private schools were actually learning online. So that was a big lesson for us. And then the second example of us ensuring that we don't run ahead of ourselves was also with gender-based violence. So what we wanted to do was to go to the department and assist with dental health, because we had spoken with dental experts who told us the issue of dental health is actually a big challenge. Amongst all of us here in the room, if you can ask yourself, when was the last time that you saw a dentist? When we hear the word dentist, we run away, kids run away. So it was a noble cause for us. But when we arrived at the department, they told us that they had just received a letter from the presidency asking the department to address the challenge of bullying in the schools and gender-based violence, because these challenges were actually beginning to impact educational outcomes. That is how our psychosocial support program was born. Now, the challenge with always going to the partner to say, can we do this, can we not do that, is that sometimes you move slowly. And Nick has experienced that when he works with us, because the systems in government are a little bit slower than those that we have in the private sector. And we have experienced those challenges where, for instance, we are setting a Thuthuzela Centre, which is a one-stop shop for the victims of gender-based violence. Everyone comes to the table coordinated by the Department of Basic Education, and then halfway through the project, then one of the partners in government then decides that they want things to be signed. And then we have a choice to say, do we walk away? Because we have a budget that has been assigned to us. If I don't use that budget, the Treasury Office in Vodacom, they will say, it means the partnership is not working. So what we do is to actually sit with all the internal stakeholders within Vodacom and get them to understand the operational environment of our partners so that we don't lose hope. And we find that when everyone within Vodacom understands the operational environment of our stakeholders and what we want to achieve, then we don't lose the budgets. We actually become patient until the doors are opened.
I've allowed that very comprehensive response because I think it's a beautiful way of actually adding texture to things that we've been talking about a little theoretically about the complexity of partnership. And what I'm hearing you saying is that partnerships are important. They might not always be easy, but it also is about allowing yourselves to be led, irrespective of the strength that you bring into that partnership. And there are moments where you lead and there are moments that you are being led. The way you talk about being restrained or called back by the government is in a very positive frame. It speaks to an openness and a culture to receiving feedback within a partnership so that you can keep that alignment. And I just wanted that not to be lost on us, because I think we've had a lot of conversations since yesterday about public-private partnerships, about why partnerships don't work, why they might be difficult. And here we sit with a real-life example to say, actually, it is complex, but it is possible. It just depends on the posture that we all take in that. So I've really appreciated that, and which is why I've just allowed you to really land the point for us. And we're going to build quite a bit on what you've shared. Louis, let me then just come to you next then to say, from an education system perspective, what are you seeing as the biggest gaps between having a provision of digital tools and those tools actually translating into teaching and learning outcomes? That's the first part of the question. The second part being, and what do you see the role and the opportunity for CSI, for corporates to play in making that bridge between the actual device and the learning outcome a lot shorter?
Thank you, Nozipo, and thank you very much for the invitation to government to participate in this very meaningful conversation. One cannot look at South Africa's education, state of education, I'm talking of basic education, or our education system without the historical context. Do we have challenges? We are dealing with the very basics of providing education. Today, 2026, we are currently replacing 4,000 pit latrines. We feed 8 million children every day in order for those children to learn. And this I mentioned the dignity. A child cannot learn without dignity. So we're very much stuck in the basics of providing a quality education. And that is because where we come from. Having said that, the challenges present an opportunity to us all. Government itself cannot vastly improve and catch up with the quality of education. In terms of access and the digital divide, believe it or not, but we have around 80% of our learners who touch a computer for the first time when they go to varsity or start a job. And that cohort is what Taki has mentioned, the quintile 1, 2, and 3. It's a massive disadvantage to those children. The 20% who have access to technology get better jobs.
Yeah.
And this is where partnerships come in. Yes, government has the responsibility to provide quality public education, but we cannot do it by ourselves. All of us, business, the non-governmental society, government, our answer lies in collaboration and partnerships. But we are South Africans. We have overcome so much. There are not many countries in this world who come from our history that live peacefully today despite our challenges. So we see our challenges as opportunities. And this has made some examples of Vodacom's, and I want to use this as an example. There are many of our public partners in this room. Vodacom has done a lot to close that gap.
Yeah.
What the department appreciates of, and this is what I mean about meaningful partnerships and collaboration. It's not throwing money at a school. It is an integrated approach.
Sure.
You cannot give a child a device without the teacher having been trained to teach that child how to use the device. You cannot give connectivity to a school when there's not ablution facilities. And that is Vodacom's approach. It's an integrated approach. Another example is Vodacom Foundation. Same thing. Not just throwing resources, but to take hands with government. Take has spoken a lot about it. How we work together with business as government to ensure that we close this gap.
Sure.
I want to touch on one last thing that Dr. Williams spoke about in the opening. Over the last 15 years in our partnership framework as the Department of Basic Education, we work with business to assist us with governance and accountability. And we, in all our partnership agreements, it is taken up there that we both share that responsibility, that what is given by business, their corporate social investment, they do get the tax benefits, but we ensure that it makes a difference in the life of a teacher and a learner. And it's only through partnerships that we can close this divide, all of us. Thank you, Lois.
Louis, thank you so very much. And I just want to underscore the point that you make on an integrated approach, because I think in the previous conversation, we had Tracy Webster up on stage and she spoke about starting off with a line that says, we don't do infrastructure. That is, that was the line of the particular organization that she's leading. And then the opportunity to make a difference outside of the scope that we've always held, or the mandate that we've always held. And what I'm hearing you saying is that stepping into an integrated approach is going to require partners to think beyond the core business that they have to offer and begin to think, how do I contribute beyond this? And that's where leaning on others, but perhaps enabling them with resources and other forms of capacity becomes so important. I don't want that to be lost, because I think you make a very good point, and you make the example of Vodacom and others that are in the room. Mum Staff, let me bring you into this conversation, because we also know that we're never short of initiatives. And I can imagine that with digital inclusion initiatives as well, that they are a dime at a dozen. Now, my question to you is, when do they most fall short? If you were to see a fault line, where do you think that fault line most often shows itself up? And what is it that we could be thinking about as we look at those fault lines to ensure that communities more consistently benefit from these initiatives?
Thank you very much, and good morning. And I think the issue in terms of what are some of the barriers which inhibits most of the digital inclusion initiative is the fact that by its nature, it assumes existence of particular basics. And those basics is, one is access to digital infrastructure, like computers. The second one is the fact that the users will have access to digital literacy. And most importantly is the affordability level. So if you look in terms of our context, especially in the schooling system, if we are saying in the world, and in particular in South Africa, the digital economy is what is going to provide opportunities for young people, what is the schooling system doing in terms of providing those basics? And unfortunately, in the last 30 years, there have been piecemeal, but no systemic intervention where, as part of provision of a school, you must have a computer lab. As part of the provision of the school, you must have an infrastructure which is making digital, to have access to utilize the platform. And those are some of the things where you can bring innovations. But if quintile 1 to quintile 3 schools don't have computer labs, they don't have them in the homes. In the homes, they've got one room they share. Their parents are not concerned about them having computers. They are concerned about what are they going to eat tomorrow. So it is the obligation of the state and the private sector to begin to provide those basics. And therefore, you know, in my experience of working in the TechnoGirl program, one of the saddest parts is when that child, we have made sure that, number one, your success is dependent on you taking mathematics. It doesn't matter what you want to be, but unfortunately, the notion of mathematic literacy is a non-starter. You must understand that when you make that decision, you are putting a lifetime barrier. So, but they will take mathematics. We will support them with the support of companies, because in quintile 1 and 3 schools, there's no one at home who's going to check whether you have chosen maths or maths literacy. There is no one who's going to make sure that you apply on time. When the higher institutions have taken the decision that application will be online, that decision by itself is excluding them. So how are they going to do online application? And you have an organization like Grades Match, which wants to say, we will be there to afford them, we'll create clinics, and they can come and do application online, but they will not necessarily have an overwhelming support from corporates to fund that. So for me, those are the barriers of life, to say, if we are not going to make provision of basic service, which is important for these young people and for these communities to access and participate in the vast variety of opportunities offered by the digital economy. That's why initiative. In our case, we go and say we will provide virtual job shadowing, but you go to a school in the middle of nowhere in Limpopo, the teacher only has a phone.
Yeah.
And that's a personal data. So what's going to happen? A school has got one computer with 600 grade 12s. A school has got one laptop. So there is no systemic, intentional decision to understand that provision of digital resource is mandatory.
Sure.
It's basic.
So if I take away from that response is that unless the basic service delivery is in place, basic conditions for us to be able to participate in this digital economy, the digital opportunities, unless those basics are in place, we might as well not even have any initiatives because we're leaving the vast number of people behind in any event. So let's turn this maybe into bring in a bit of a positive tone, Sympathone, as I bring you in, because you're a graduate of the Youth Academy program. Tell us a little bit about your experience. I think that's one. But also, post the program, when you graduated, how did that translate into opportunities? How has that contributed to any success that you might have enjoyed since then?
Thank you, Nosipo. My journey through the Academy has been very transformative. As a girl from Guyana coming to the big city, traditionally you're told you must go to varsity and work, which is the route I followed. Graduated, after my graduation, couldn't find employment. And I enrolled into the Youth Academy. And through that journey, that's when I realized that digital inclusivity is very important.
Yeah.
Because not only did the program as a whole give me confidence, discipline, it also gave me an opportunity to translate the knowledge that I had into opportunities.
Yeah.
Because later on, it opened doors for employment. It did open doors for facilitation role, which is where I'm at. And it has been a very incredible journey, I must say.
So it's opened doors for employment. It's allowed you to now play a role as a facilitator in your own right. Can you maybe comment for me, what do you think was the biggest difference? What made the biggest difference? What was the greatest impact for you in the program?
As a learner in the program, as it has been said by some of my panelists, coming from Guyana, I had never been exposed to any kind of technology. It is, you see it even currently with my current learners, you find that somebody has never been exposed to a laptop.
Yeah.
And you see that when you enroll them and you teach them and you take them through the program, and later on, whether it's intermediate course that they would have done, or because as the Vodacom Foundation, what we do is that we not only give the basics, right? Because we believe that continuous support
Sure.
is very important, which will then expose the youth who would otherwise would not have been exposed to these opportunities.
It's not lost on me that in 2026, we still speak about children who have never seen a computer. I don't want to reveal my age, but I remember my mother went to a loan shark to buy the oldest computer one could have imagined so that I could have the chance of taking up coding in high school, which I then dropped after 3 months because it was just too difficult. But the point being that it takes that much of a commitment, even in a household and in a family, to put one device in. And I can imagine how many would just never ever have the opportunity. And you walk onto campus at a university and suddenly you are submitting online, you are doing your assessments online, and so the challenge just becomes real. The poll that we put up, and I'm going to ask the team to put it back up now, the poll that we're going to put back up now is to look at the results, and remember the question was about where's the gap, and I think it's the reason why this conversation is really focused on those gaps for the most part. I'm going to bring in the questions from the audience in a moment, but I'd love to get a quick snap reaction to that. The audience is telling us, this is 128 people who have participated, they're saying, actually what they observe as the greatest gap between digital access and that actually translated into real inclusion, at 52%, which probably has been the highest rating we've gotten over the last 2 days, they say, Taki, it's actually affordable devices and connectivity. So if we can get an affordable device and get connectivity, we're halfway there. That's 54% of the room. At 17%, we have saying, well, it actually is the parents not having any digital literacy, and it's just the community also not being digitally literate. So there's an element in the room that says it's bigger than what happens in the classroom. It also extends into the home and extends into the community. That's about 17%. I want to highlight a few more. At 12% is teacher training and classroom support, so much lower than what I would have anticipated given the central role. I think you raised this, Louis, about the teacher having the capacity to understand how to use the device effectively. 9% say it's data to track learning and inclusion outcomes. And then at the very least, at 3%, relevant digital learning content. That for me is quite surprising, because for me it says you have the device, but if the content is not relevant to teaching and learning, surely, that must be important. So I don't want to overimpose my views on this. Taki, as you look at that very quickly, what stands out for you? What worries you about this picture, or what gives you comfort about this picture?
Affordability is the main issue.
Yeah.
So GSMA, which is an organization that brings the mobile network operators together globally and the partners across the value chain, has actually identified affordability of data, affordability of devices, and digital literacy as some of the impediments to access to communication. And that then begs the question to us in the technology sector to say, how do we remove these barriers? And as Vodacom, I remember when I joined in 2016, time flies, 10 years ago, 1 gig of data, a bundle for a month, was costing 149 rands. And the Competition Commission intervened after the hashtag Data Must Fall campaign, which was run in Parliament. The Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition actually took that project and handed it over to the Competition Commission. And after the inquiry, which was the data market inquiry, that headline price had to reduce from 149 rands to 99 rands, and today it sits at 85 rands. But do most people, especially the poorest of the poor, even afford that 85 rands?
Sure.
And we always reflect as Vodacom to say we should not only cater for the middle class and the rich, we should also look at the mass segment, the poorest of the poor. And for that reason, in partnership with Andy Sahir, my colleague, we have what we call personalized pricing.
Sure.
And this uses your emerging digital technologies, artificial intelligence and big data analytics to actually study the spending patterns and the geographical location of the user without impacting on your privacy.
Okay.
And from that platform, which is called J4U platform, Just For You platform, because of the use of these digital technologies, we can actually go to the platform based on our patterns. We can find that a gig of data for me may be costing 20 rands, and for him, it may be costing 50 rands. And when we talk about this, people say, but we do not know about just for you.
Yeah.
We do not know about personalized pricing. And that is where we reflect to say, are we communicating enough? That's a challenge for us. Then there's the issue of devices.
Sure.
Now, there's always this misconception, especially when we work with our partners in government, we always get these requests about provide connectivity and also the devices. And we all say, we do not manufacture devices.
Devices, yeah.
We manufacture bundles, voice, SMS, and data. For us to be able to provide a comprehensive solution to a school, it means the original equipment manufacturers must also come to the party.
Yeah.
But in the schools that we have adopted, we actually provide those devices. Now, accessibility to smartphones is a big issue. About 50% of our customers are still on 2G phones, which means they don't have access to the internet. And it is because of affordability.
Of devices.
And we engaged with the Department of Communications and also Trade and Industry to say what needs to be done to ensure that people should have access to devices. Sure. And the Minister of Communications last year made a breakthrough when he engaged with National Treasury so that they should remove the tax that was levied on smart devices, because National Treasury was actually treating smart devices as luxury items.
Sure.
And through that engagement, now smart devices that are up to 2,500 rands, they do not have that tax. But we are engaging further to say it should not stop just with those devices that are up to 2,500 rands. It should be all the devices. And then what else do we do in partnership with government to make sure that this comprehensive approach works? We then provide connectivity to the schools, where we provide a router and a SIM. And here I'm not talking about our ecosystem schools.
Sure.
I'm talking about the schools
General.
Broadly. And why that works the most is that we are not providing affordability to an individual consumer. When you provide data and connectivity to a school, you're actually benefiting about 1,000 learners in a school who are able to access connectivity during school hours. And then we also have our teacher centers, which we call community development centers, which are used to train teachers during school hours, where we provide a computer lab. But those centers are called community development centers because they operate as internet cafes.
For the community.
So that the poorest of the poor who do not have access to data at home can go in there without having to take a taxi to go and access the internet. They access that for free in our facilities. So that's the comprehensive approach that we have. And then, of course, we also zero rate some websites. And for most of the NPOs that are sitting in the room, if you want some of your websites to be zero rated, please reach out to ICASA, the regulator. They've got criteria where they screen the applications. And if you pass the test, and the test means that you are actually complying with South African laws. If you are complying with all South African laws and you are properly registered, then you can get your sites to be zero rated.
Sure.
And then it means the poorest of the poor will be able to access. We are also zero rating government sites so that the citizens should be able to get access. To citizen services for free. But it's a journey that we are walking.
So, Taki, thank you very much. And I think you preempted where the conversation was going to go, because I think this year, the year before, and the year before, every time we get to this conversation, the conversation always is about affordability. And you've hit the nail on the head, but what I've appreciated is that you've distinguished and differentiated between the affordability of data and the affordability of devices, because these are distinct things that we need to be thinking about. I just want to read a question that Daniel had put, which you've already answered, but I just want you to underscore the significance of this. So Daniel was saying, when one operator can generate more than 14 billion rand from prepaid mobile data in South Africa, how do we balance shareholder value with the urgent need to make data affordable enough for young people to learn, to work, to innovate, and to participate fully in the digital economy? And to your point, personalized pricing, and again to the point that you make, do we know about it? Is there a broader awareness that there is a differentiation in pricing that people can pursue? So thank you for that response. And Daniel, thank you for the question. Louis, I want to bring a question from Khunzi to you. And Khunzi says, parents, where are the parents sitting in the integrated approach to ensure that the technological gap is actually closed? Yes, we need skilled teachers and good devices, but we also need programs that empower parents to provide the necessary support to their children. And more importantly, the guidance to use that technology responsibly. Where are we placing the parents? And I'm putting that back to you, Louis, because you raised the integrated approach and you raised it in the context of private sector partners. But Khunzi is challenging us to say, have we forgotten about the role of the parent in that ecosystem of support for the learner? What is your response to that?
You know, we must never underestimate the ability and the resilience of children. We have seen in the education system, once a child has an opportunity, connectivity, devices, the child actually becomes the teacher of the parent, particularly given our history. We have so many parents who cannot assist their children with homework because they were not educated.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm saying, instead of looking at the challenge, all of us, government, business, civil society, need to see the opportunities here. If I have a problem on my phone, I give it to my granddaughter. She helps me. She's 12 years old. She knows more about me than my own phone. Children do become the teachers of parents. And they are a huge resource. Just give them the opportunity. I agree, affordability and connectivity. The telecoms companies in South Africa, part of their licensing agreement is to connect X amount of schools every year. Some are falling behind. I'm delighted that Vodacom, I think, are ahead of their schedule. Together we can close this divide.
Sure.
And just give children the opportunity. I have seen, even in a classroom setup, where a child assists the teacher with technology.
Yeah.
We must just never underestimate the potential of children. Just give them the opportunity.
And provided, of course, that the moment and the environment is allowing for the child to do that in relation to the teacher, because the safest thing for the teacher to do is to this digital world.
I think in the big scale of things, no. It is statistically insignificant if you look at the rural schools. However, I think if you look at the new innovations coming, we have got what is now called the Transformation Fund. I think it is up to us as citizens to say that we'd like to see the Transformation Fund being utilized in deploying infrastructure in rural schools. Because one of the key criteria of the Transformation Fund is that it needs to transform societies, it needs to transform individuals. And if the intention is to make sure that rural communities and informal settlement communities are not left behind, let's deploy the infrastructure. Let's bring connectivity, let's bring computer labs, and therefore make sure that the schools, fortunately in terms of the new budgeting mechanisms, most of those schools are given budgets. Then when they have the infrastructure, they will be in a position to budget. But more importantly, let the ICASA also be intentional in terms of making sure that the service providers also zero rate those content.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things I just want to share is the fact that also it's important that we appreciate the fact that young people must take up their career as teachers, because young people, take up technology very quick. and they really embed it as part of their methodology. But the universities must also be on board, because we cannot continue at preset level where we are producing teachers, but digital literacy is not part of it. Integration of ICT as part of pedagogy is not included. I mean, in my other life, I do evaluation. So when Gauteng Online started, we evaluated its impact. And we went to one of these schools, and this teacher has been teaching grade 12 for the last 15 years and has been getting 100% exemption A and B and C's in mathematics. And he says to me, so tell me, Mrs. Sithole, why must I now bring the laptop? Because my child is producing the A's. And he was very honest to say, you see this smart board, the MEC has put, I cover it with my chalk, with my, I mean, yes, he has the pedagogy he's using is making them pause, but it's limiting their potential.
Sure. Thank you very much. I'm going to read this question, last question from Tamiko, but I'm going to paraphrase the question back to you, Sympathone. So Tamiko says, while we may provide pathways for digital inclusion at a young level, how are we going to bridge the increasing gap between cities and rural areas for meaningful economic inclusion and just jobs? Are we preparing youth for the jobs and the work of the future? And the way I want to paraphrase this to Sympathone is to say, as a facilitator, where you now have the opportunity to impact the lives of other young people, are you getting a sense that once they go through the programs that you're facilitating, that they are more or better positioned to get jobs? Are they getting the jobs? And do you think there's a greater sense of confidence that they are more employable and can participate in the economy?
Yes, definitely. As somebody who is on the ground, I get to see firsthand what impact skills development can do. As I did mention, we bring in these kids with basic digital knowledge. We equip them with information, and they are now able to use the knowledge that they have gained to seek employment opportunities. And not only employment opportunities, for them to go out there and start their own businesses. We have seen from my center in Lemoshanang, in Atteridgeville, which is a township, a girl child who was not able to enroll into university, come into the course, and they do their training, and after that they are able to, one of them, for example, has started their own ECD center.
Wow.
Where they have taken the basic digital literacy courses that we have done. Now they are incorporating it from that early stages of education for their center. So from the ground, you really see the impact that real digital inclusion, if it is done properly with consistent support, with practical work, it does really trickle through families, through communities, and you really get to see the impact that it does to a household wherein they had never had a graduate. But somebody who has gone through this process now is able to start not only their own business, but can go and be employed by either one of the government departments or
Vodacom.
Or Vodacom. Myself, my journey, as I did indicate that I'm a product of the program myself. And look at me.
What a beautiful way of closing it. Let's give you a big round of applause. Look at you indeed. And such a beautiful personal story, but also the power of realizing how your own story has amplified so much. And you now tell the story of others and the impact that they're making in their communities makes this conversation exceptional. Can I please ask that we give my panelists a big round of applause? Thank you very much.